Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Centric. This being a show where I talk about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Prodigal Son. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. It's a very interesting case we have in this particular episode because they find a body of this professor. His name is George. But, his body's in a very interesting situation. There's a note left on his body. His eyes are the situation they are. But then it also turns out, his head was cut open and his brain was surgically removed. And it's oh, that's interesting. But I also love that there's a little bit of, an interesting thing. Because, obviously, Malcolm shows up and he's handing out lollipops to everyone. I love that the fact is that Gil is the only one who literally opens his up at the crime scene and everything like that. It's forget about contaminating evidence and stuff like that. It's as long as you're careful, who cares? But I love Idris. I was oh my god, you gave me this. It's I didn't know we were exchanging gifts. I can actually go get something really quick. But it's actually, let's focus on this crime scene. I just thought that was kind of adorable. I love that little thing of how she's super adorable around Malcolm. I love it. Even later on, it's Malcolm's doing his thing and everything. Because she was oh my god, she's eating it. Because she's even talking about the fact this cherry's her favorite and everything. And she's eating it. She's this is actually super good. And she's oh man, the way your brain works, essentially, when you come to these conclusions and stuff like that. And Gil has to stop her. She's fine, welcome to the team and everything. It's just adorable how she is around Malcolm. I love that. But it's a very interesting case. This revolves around another well-known person that actually it's someone that Malcolm actually looks up to. Her name's Elaine. Interestingly enough, she's played by the actress who played Agent Christopher in Timeless. I'm also blanking on her character's name from American Gods. I'm blanking on it right now, but she's also in American Gods as well. So it's just neat. I was but essentially it seems this all stems from some basically off the books experiments that they did. Some experiments kind of crossing the line where basically they'd kind of douse people with LSD and stuff like that. One person her name was Alice. She ended up basically killing herself because of it. And it seems that's actually what this whole case is actually about. There was one other professor dude who was, trying to hide stuff in front of Elaine, but the moment he got a chance, he tried to tell, Danny. But there's the whole thing of, he was almost killed as well, and the fact of the matter is him having Malcolm like that, and, he's stopping Danny from shooting just because he wants to handle things his way. I mean, it's kind of would you almost think in the grand scheme of things, Danny shooting him would have been, in a sense, better than you doing what you did. Because at the same time, it's I was oh my god, he's super dead because Malcolm just knocks. I was I thought you had some cool move to do. It's no, you just knocked him back and he fell. I was oh man, this is sad. He just ends up dying anyway. But it's no, there was a ledge underneath that he ends up falling and hurting himself on. And Danny's all right, so you knew about that ledge being there. And Malcolm's sure. And she's looking at him really? I love that he wasn't even sure about that. It's just kind of yeah, sure, I knew it was there. Let's go with that. And he tries to justify it later on, being oh, I knew that, because of his LSD trip that, a physical hit would kind of shock him out of the trip, So, but it turns out, there was one particular patient, his name is Dominic. Basically, mentally he wasn't all there, but basically the LSD sent him into a nightmare. This whole episode, a lot of it has to deal with fear, and he was kind of stuck in a perpetual nightmare that he couldn't escape from. And in his mind, because that's what he calls him, a visionary killer. They're basically thinking that everything he did is for a greater purpose, that is maybe whether it's a god or the devil telling him to do something. And he thinks this is his great cause because of these fears that he's kind of submitting to. So luckily they were able to he was stopped. Obviously, Elaine was going through some LSD trips, but Malcolm was able to kind of talk her down. But I love even in that moment, it's because he made there was that bit about him trying to figure out JT's initials, what they stood for. And after everything was said and done, he's who? Jehovah. And he was looking at him what? And he's Jerome? He's come on, you got to tell me at this point what it's all about. What your initials are. He's come give me a hint. It's you're probably never going to know. I didn't there was that instance in the, when they were staking out and stuff like that. It's yeah, I get it. Elaine's one of you, which Malcolm was no, I'm not one of her. I'm one of you. Which he's like, because the fact is, JT kind of has this issue with him because it's like, you don't respect the badge because I am an officer. The fact is, I do have a badge, I do have a ranking, but you don't respect that. But for Malcolm, it's like literally a cop came and saved my life by arresting my dad. Obviously, he avoided the details, but it's like you obviously JT kind of got where he was going. But it's like, so out of anyone, I had the most respect by the badge and everyone who has it. So I just thought that was kind of an interesting conversation. On top of all that, and it's kind of like the revolving thing about this episode, like I said, is about fear. The fact of the matter is, I was curious like how Jessica was going to handle this whole confronting Malcolm thing. She goes super direct. She goes there, but he's already changed the locks and everything. But because of his night terror, he ends up flinging himself out the window. And it's like, oh my God. And she's like, are you okay? Good. Now buzz me up. I'm like, your son is still literally hanging out the window and you're telling him to buzz you in. And so that ends up being a whole thing of her confronting him and everything about, because like obviously the memories you have, they're not real. Why do you keep thinking that? Like the fact of the matter is, in her own way, she is trying to be a good mother, but at the same time, it's like there is still something there. Because it's interesting because we actually go back to 98 where she actually came and visited Martin. Now, like, it's just always been something weird about Jessica to me, and it's something I've kind of noted, like, especially like in this episode when she was talking to, Martin back then. The fact of the matter is, he's all being like, oh my God, like, we'll get past this. Well, we built so much together, but for her, it's the way she was talking, it was almost like, how could you do this to our... It was almost more of a selfish thing. Like, I get... Like, it's this weird thing of, like, she was talking about it more so from what this did to their family. Like, our family will leave you behind. You'll never see us again type of thing. But it wasn't more so like, oh, my God, I can't believe the atrocities that you committed. Like, she was almost having this almost civil conversation with him, which is weird knowing now that you're like, your husband's a serial killer, is already kind of out there in the open. He's talking about defense and everything. You're so calm, cool, and collected that I find it weird that she was so... not nonchalant, but there was just something about her tone that just didn't seem right. But even Martin bringing up something interesting where he's like, the fact of the matter is, basically, it's insinuating that she kind of knew what things really were. The fact of the matter is, I played this role of being a good husband. You got what you wanted out of everything. But the fact of the matter is, I had to do things to kind of satisfy my urges that allowed me to put all this love and care towards you and our kids, because I was basically outletting essentially my sadistic side on other people. That was just an interesting conversation, and she was just kind of walking away, and she was almost shocked to hear him say all that stuff. Like I said, it's just, that relationship is weird because, and it's not just on the Martin side of things, it's weird on the Jessica side as well. What I also thought was kind of interesting that basically Jessica went to everyone to try and get Malcolm to stop seeing his dad. It's actually interesting because we end up finding out that basically he's visiting his therapist, the therapist that he has had since he was 11 years old, which she's like, I've kind of recommended you see another therapist, one that is more well equipped for someone your age. But for him, he makes excuses, but I think it's also because psychologically he has a specific tie to her, because probably like much like Gil is so important to him because it was like you were there at such a critical moment in his life with this whole situation. She was also, a foundation of everything too. So like going to someone else just wouldn't be the same, because it's like she's a tie to that night, or rather those series of events. So he has that connection with her. He connected with her, and it doesn't seem like Malcolm connects with very many people. So once he has, it's hard to break that connection for him, and he feels like he's afraid to kind of, it's like, because he also doesn't have to talk. It's like she knows everything that's going down in his path. He doesn't have to bring it up. It's just kind of like you don't have to break people in about your circumstance, which he's kind of having to do now with Danny and JT. But you get what I'm trying to say. I think it's an interesting element. But even she's being like, whoa, you actually went to visit your dad? Whoa, you're doing solving cases and stuff like that. It's like, oh, we haven't even talked about the reason why you got fired from the FBI, or the reason why you quit, the whole thing. So it's like, yeah, I wonder if we're going to get any more future therapy sessions. Maybe not. But once again, kind of showing you like the craziness that is Jessica. It's like, not craziness, but like the interesting aspect, because she goes to visit Ainsley, and it's like, oh, go tell your brother, to kind of stop all this, but for her, Ainsley, it's like this whole, Ainsley has it like where Malcolm has his complicated thing, Ainsley does too. Like, I done brought that up before. No one in this family is sane and well put together. They're all kind of faking it, because like they're all kind of broken in their own way. Because even Ainsley was like, the fact of the matter is I have no memories of my dad. I never got to know him like Malcolm did because she was so young at the time. All I know about him is the more monstrous size that you tell me. But the fact of the matter is I feel like that's not all there is to him, that there is more to it. But then you have her mom pushing back. It's like, oh, like the fact is you sleep good at night, right? You have peaceful sleep. That's because of me. You can thank me at any moment in time, which is like, I guess her mom's getting a little resentful because it's like, I literally shielded you from everything. Your brother wasn't so fortunate. He's kind of a mess. So you're lucky that you're not the mess. You're kind of well adjusted and put together. I had to worry about him, but now it seems like I have to worry about you, which I shouldn't have to because, but maybe because she was overcompensating with the whole situation with Martin, that maybe it caused some, whereas Malcolm has this complicated relationship with his dad, just because of everything went down. Maybe Ainsley's kind of got the complicated relationship with her mom because of her overcompensation with everything related to Martin. That's my thought process behind it. She comes to visit Gil. She's trying to get Gil to kind of let go of this whole thing. It's like, you brought him in a case knowing damn well that he would turn to his dad at some point in time. You knew it was a possibility, yet you still let him down his route. She even talked about the fact is of like, oh, I'm sorry for your loss because his wife died. Like, because I vaguely remember his wife coming up in conversation, but I'm pretty sure that was from episode 1. Maybe, I'm not remembering clearly, but the whole thing is like, I'm trying to remember if they referenced the fact that she was gone or more so made it seem like maybe they would have. I don't remember what the exact circumstances were. I feel like this might be the first instance of us hearing that she died. What was interesting though is like, oh, you're 3 years too late, which is interesting. Like, I guess it's not, I guess because Jessica tries to cut ties with everything that's a reminder of that time, tries to block it all out. So probably talking to Gil, which is like, what made that 3-year period where it's like you didn't get in contact with him for you to say that now? Or maybe it's because this is her first time in front of him, or maybe she didn't say it in general. Maybe there was no card or no letter or any like condolences on her part. I don't know. I'm curious about that. But Gil's trying to explain the fact of the matter is Malcolm's going to do whatever he wants to do. Ain't no one going to change that. But then you have Jessica being like, yeah, I don't think that's so, oh yeah, we'll see about that, which is like kind of showing, her more controlling side. That's why I'm like, the dynamic in that family is so twisted and weird. But the fact of the matter is, it's actually interesting because Elaine ended up kind of giving Malcolm, because obviously the case, and I think that's something we're going to see, is obviously the cases kind of bounce back and forth between, what Malcolm and everything is kind of dealing with, and he needs to confront, and kind of ties into the case in particular, because Elaine, because the whole thing about fear, because he's been afraid, his fear has kind of gotten the best of him, like the whole, the tremors are being back, like his dad had brought that up, earlier in the episode and everything, which I loved him being like, oh yeah, I know what's going on because I saw you and your sister. News is kind of, whatever local news or whatever he was saying, like, it's kind of amateurish, but your sister's got the chops and everything like that. And it's like, oh, can you turn that down a little bit? I'm on the phone with my son. It's just like his mannerisms and stuff like that. I even love it later on when Jessica comes to visit him. He's super happy to see her and everything. It's like, oh, you're basically at that prime sex age in your life where you hit your prime when it comes to all of that. And it's like you're always meeting up with the person that what was it that basically saying, like, the guy that does the job and does it well, essentially. When you meet that you always kind of circle back to that person who is always compatible with you, who laid it down right, essentially, for lack of a better term. And she was basically like, I need you to stop seeing Malcolm. And Martin's just kind of like, well, nice job killing the mood. I just love that line from him. But it led to just some interesting back and forth, because it's like, even chained up, she tells, like, he reaches out to her and she freaks out because she's like, even chained up, I still look at you as a monster. I'm scared of you. The fact of the matter is all that you've done to our family, because the fact is you did do so much for me. You gave us so much, even though my mom said you were penniless. The fact of the matter is you were never able to kind of sustain the life that I deserve to live, which is interesting, because I guess that had kind of come up. The fact is the money comes from, I mean, he was, successful in his own right, but it seems the money mainly comes from her. Have they ever talked about what like, I guess they're owed money. Like, at least on their mom, like on Jessica's side of the family, they're kind of owed money, which begs the question, like, is anyone else in her family still alive? What about Martin's side of the family? Like, I'm curious, like, are we going to ever tackle extended family or not? We'll see. But what I thought was interesting was, like, for her, the whole thing of, like, you've taken everything from me. This whole debacle with you took everything from me that we built up. All I have left is our children. Don't take that away from me. Don't take Malcolm. Because obviously she kept throwing in Ainsley, but part of me is like the focus always seemed to be about Malcolm. Because I guess he's the flight risk in a sense of, like, Martin kind of swaying him. So I just thought that was kind of interesting. And obviously, trying to trigger those memories, those suppressed memories, using smell and everything. If it was in fact chloroform, Malcolm puts chloroform on his pillow just to trigger those memories, and he remembers when he was young, he was like 11 or whatever. He goes back to the chest, but it wasn't Martin that stopped him this time. This was a different time. This was like after he'd already gone there, and his dad had previously drugged him multiple times. His mom grabs him and tells him, it's like, you don't know what your dad's capable of. And then, Malcolm wakes up and he's like, wait, Mom, what did you do? So now it brags, because like I said, I had this inkling almost like she knew. Like, I've had this inkling, like, maybe there was more to this, that she had some idea, that maybe there was some part of her that was a little selfish, that she wanted to keep what they had, so she was willing to cover for him in certain regards. Like, maybe she had an idea, like, maybe because, like, history has warped things, but maybe his mom knew exactly what Martin was doing, drugging him and everything, but didn't say. I don't know. Or maybe she found out that Martin was drugging him, to make him forget, or I don't know. Because that makes me immediately think, no, she's the one that got rid of the body. Martin never did. Or maybe she came across him getting rid of the body. So the reason why she's playing dumb now is because she could be implicated, where it's like, oh, because obviously his dad tried to throw him under the bus last episode by being like, oh, the fact of the matter is, if you saw something but you didn't act upon it immediately, why didn't you act upon it immediately? How many more people died because you didn't act upon it immediately? How long did it take you to call a cop? Days, weeks, months? But now I think it's just because on top of that, he also has his mom, who makes it seem like, oh, everything you're thinking about is crazy. But the fact of the matter is, you might have had a part to play in this. But like I said, I think it's because she would be kind of considered an accomplice. And, in her own twisted way, maybe she was trying to keep the family together. I don't know. There's a lot to digest about this family in their twisted situation. I'm curious to kind of dive into this whole Jessica side of things, because I'm sure, because even if he confronts his mom's never going to give him a straight answer. She never does. So no one seems to, but it definitely seems like Martin's kind of hinting that it seemed like from the very beginning Malcolm was like, oh, I'm gonna figure it out. Remember, I made point of it last episode where it's like Martin was like, good for you. It's because he wants him to remember that, like, hey, it's not just on me. Maybe try to say, like, because, obviously, Jessica tries to say, like, when I look into, Martin's eyes, I see a monster, but it's like, maybe she already knew the monster was there, but, because obviously it's like the question becomes, like, who is this lady? Why was her body never found? Because Jessica hid it. Like, she at no point because she never can confess of, like, oh, I know where the body is, because it, inadvertently would turn back on her. Maybe there's a little bit of evil in her own family of, like, maybe they come from a rich and powerful, like I said, old money type of thing of, like, they're used to handling things a certain way. It's like no matter what the circumstances are, you kind of keep everything in-house. But things kind of went out of her control when Malcolm called the cops, so she kind of had to go with the flow, so she tries to get defensive and stuff like that, but maybe it was just kind of like I can't help you, the fact of the matter is you kind of screw the pooch. Like when she visited Martin in 98, it just seems, like I said, just her demeanor and everything just seems off. So that's why I'm really interested to kind of dive into this and figure out, like, what the hell went on back then and what's still going on now, what role Jessica had to play in all this. Like I said, I don't think she's directly involved in killings, but it does seem like she is hiding a lot. So I'm very interested to see where this takes us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.